All right. Hey, what's up, everybody? So we're here for another interesting interview, and today we have with us Karlene Simpson. So let me just go ahead and ask her to just give a brief introduction of who she is. And she's my sister, by the way, so I'll put that part in here. So go ahead.
Hi, everyone. As Andre said, I'm one of several siblings. I'm the oldest, even though I look like the baby. And all of us, I'm the only one that has the disease sickle cell, and which is what I'm here to talk about today.
Okay.
I have one daughter. She's 7 years old. My miracle child, as I call her.
Definitely.
And yeah, so I'm here to answer whatever question you guys have regarding my journey and living with sickle cell and turning 43 yesterday. Something I'm very proud of, considering they tell you so many times that you're never going to see this age or that age, or you can't do this and you can't do that.
Exactly.
And I've overcome all those obstacles, and here I am by the grace of God. So let's get into it.
All right, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Marsha, go ahead.
Hi, I am Marsha, and I am Andre's co-host, and we're trying to share stories with our diaspora, both, people abroad as well as Jamaicans, because I don't live in Jamaica at the moment. I am in Canada. It's winter in September, actually. It's very, 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 very cold. I'm going to need mittens this week. I'm wearing jackets already. It's super cool. And I hope to hear about this. I've always heard about sickle cell anemia and whoever have traits, etc. So it would be very good to hear about this, and happy belated birthday. And you look great for 43.
Thank you very much.
All right, so let's start with what was it like for you growing up with the disease and the negativity you would hear? Like, what was it like for you growing up?
Well, my family didn't know I had the disease until I was about 8 years old, when I literally almost died in my grandma's arm, and I was rushed to the emergency room from the doctor's office. And that was the point in which they found out about sickle cell disease. And of course, they didn't know what that was or how it's treated, or what were the ramifications of having this disease, or how you even get it. They didn't even know it was an inherited disease. Let me explain that first of all, because sickle cell disease, the only way you can have it is if both parents have one of each gene. So the disease are broken down into different types of genes. Some people have SS, which is fully blown sickle cell, which is the worst of all the different levels of sickle cell, because there's levels to sickle cell disease. That's a lot of people is not aware of. So there's SS, then there's SC, which is sickle cell, but you have the disease, but it's not as severe as people with SS. And then at around 18 years, going into 1920, I found out that I, in fact, don't have SS, but I have what they call sickle thalassemia. So my symptoms went from just being pain crisis to also having respiratory crisis, because I have one of each gene. I have the sickle cell gene, I have the thalassemia. And thalassemia is what you mostly find in Caucasians or people from the Middle Eastern. They have thalassemia. So obviously a history from my family, somewhere along the bloodline, that's where I got the thalassemia from. I'm not sure which of my two parents have thalassemia and which one have sickle cell, but I got one of each gene. That's the first thing as far as sickle cell is concerned. So most African Americans or people from the Caribbean or Africa, we have SS or SC. But there's some people who, like myself, have sickle thalassemia, and then there's people who only have thalassemia. So there's different levels to the disease. And growing up was very hard, because once my parents and my grandma, I was raised by my grandma, found out that I had this disease, and they told her that what are some of the things that I needed to stay away from. And that was being outside playing with my friends and my family, like kids. So growing up was rough, because as soon as you're outside playing, they get nervous or worried that okay, now you're going to get sick. You're going to exhaust yourself and you're going to get sick.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Did you find out that you had sickle cell in Jamaica or in the States?
In Jamaica. I grew up in Jamaica. Came to the United States when I was 18. I
Oh.
just celebrated my 18th birthday before I came to the US. So I lived in Jamaica my whole life until 18 years of age. Then I came to the US. And in Jamaica, they treated me for SS. My treatment was always SS. It was usually a lot of pain. And I always had respiratory problem. But nobody ever think that maybe I had asthma. So that's another thing. When I turned 40 is when I heard that I had asthma. I had what they call intermittent asthma. So on top of having sickle cell, I have intermittent asthma, and that was a part of the reason my whole life I always struggled with breathing. So I couldn't participate in sports day and stuff like that. I would try, and I would do it even though they say I shouldn't. And of course, I didn't. I would always say I'm going to try it anyway. And with my wind knocking out of me literally, like the wind knock out of you trying to run. Because once you start running, then the sharp pains came with your back and your joints. And those are things that people are not aware of because you don't walk around complaining or crying. Like even just to run to the bus stop, like I used to run for the bus a lot because I'm always late. And I have to run down the bus. So by the time I get on the bus and sit down, then that pain, when that pain hits you, you have to just take deep breaths. You take deep breaths until it calms itself down. Like it's like somebody stabbing you in your back with a knife, literally. But, you know, those are some of the things that you have to go through on a daily basis as a sickle cell patient. And a lot of people, you know, the stigma, they think sickle cell patients are drug seekers. They think you're seeking attention. So those are some of the stigmas that comes with having the disease, especially when you go to the emergency room. The moment you say you have sickle cell, you're now put in a category. And not everyone coming there seeking drug. Like, yes, there are people who have sickle cell disease who have gotten hooked to the medication because of all the pain they're in. They end up being hooked to medication. And as a result, that makes it bad for others who are not in that situation. But I feel like if you go to a hospital for care, it doesn't matter what your reasons are there. As a healthcare provider, you should provide the care. That's why you're a healthcare provider. And unfortunately, that's not always the case. And so you find that people wait till they're really bad to go to the emergency room. I lost a friend of mine a few years ago because he didn't want to go to the emergency room. He tried to manage the disease at home. And a lot of us sicklers, as they call us, that's what we do. You try to fight through the pain. You try to fight through every day because you don't want to be labeled or stigmatized or you want to avoid at all costs going to an emergency room. And that's because of how they treat you. And it's even worse for a male than females, unfortunately.
Oh, wow. I think a few years ago, I heard that there was a cure for sickle cell. I think it was by blood transfusion or something. I'm not sure.
It's not
no, blood transfusion is just a treatment. It's not a cure. I do get blood transfusions every 4 months. For 10 years of my life, I was able to live without getting any of those blood transfusions when I started the drug hydroxyurea, which I'm still taking. But after having my daughter, I realized the drug hasn't been able to keep me from getting the transfusion as it used to. It still keeps me from being in the hospital. I have not been hospitalized since I had my daughter. That's the last time I've been hospitalized.
Oh, wow.
Once. So it helps to keep me out of the hospital and keep me healthy most days. You're going to get up with pain and other things going on. But for the most part, you have less hospital visits and it keeps you as healthy. But every 4 months, it seems like my body is worn down, and then I need now the transfusion in order to bring me back up, to my levels back up.
But outside of the blood transfusion, I think I read that in the UK and in the US a few years ago, they had the first person that got cured.
There are cures, but most of those cured that there have been several people who have been cured, but most of those people are children. So they found a cure for kids, but they didn't find a cure for adults. But most recently, I found out about cases with adults, what they call a bone marrow transplant. but it's not always successful, but it's one of the forms of a cure that they're trying. And I know people who have done it. One person in particular, he doesn't have the disease anymore, but he still has other medical problems still that stemmed from the disease. So even though the sickle cell was cured, there's other issues that comes along with it. But then there's other people who it didn't completely cure the disease. So it's a process still. Even today, they still haven't figured out a complete cure for sickle cell disease, because there are people who have had the bone marrow transplant and they're cured from the disease, and then there's people who did it and they're still affected in one form or another. Like they either have some people have like some kind of respiratory issue after going through, and it's a long process, and it's a risk if you decide to do the bone marrow transplant, and it's a whole process. They have to first find you a donor. They have to match you with somebody who can give you a bone marrow. Most of the time, they go through your family members first, particularly your siblings, but it has to be a sibling that doesn't have the trait. And so that's an option. But most recently, I found out about another cure that they're trying in adults.
Oh.
The one they tried years ago with patients who had AIDS, and it wasn't successful when they first did it. But over the years, they have gotten better. The only issue with that is done in Maryland, and so if whatever part of the country you live, you would have to go to Maryland to be screened to see if you qualify to do that. If you qualify to do it, if you're healthy enough to do it, and it's called a gene therapy. So they're going to use your own genes, your own sickle genes, and do some kind of mimic to your genes in order to get your cells healthy. So they're using your own gene to cure you. I can't explain the full process because I don't have enough information about it. My doctor just brought it up to me last month, as a matter of fact. And something that I've been thinking about, because it's going to be a long process. You have to be in the hospital for a while. And being that I have an 8-year-old daughter, and as a single mom, that's an issue for me because I have to think about who's going to take care of her, because right now she's remote homeschool. So someone physically at home to assist her, and that's kind of tough right now. So it's something to think about, and I honestly am thinking about, because I would like to be around to see my daughter get married, you know. I'm 43 now. They told me I wasn't going to even see my 16th birthday. So I give God thanks every day that I wake up and see another day. I'm grateful and I'm thankful. So and it's another birthday, you know.
In regards to the cost of the treatment, like is it really expensive to like constantly like go and get treated and things of that nature?
Most sickle cell patients, unfortunately, is unable to work, so they're on disability. So if they're on disability, they're able to get health insurance through what you call Medicaid. So like the government pay for their.
That's in the U.S.
In my case, that's not. I'm not on disability. I work, and so I have to pay for my healthcare visits through my work insurance, and it's a lot. Because sometimes, even after you've done the procedure, they're never going to turn you away from doing the procedure. However, then you get a bill in the mail that you can't pay. And then it's years and years and years, and it adds up. It adds up. You pay your copay, yes, but then there's still a balance because each blood transfusion is at least $5,000.
Wow. That's a lot of money.
It's a lot. It's a lot. And unless you have good insurance that cover everything, you have a balance, you know, and that depends on your job. So for people who are on Medicaid or Medicare or any of the state health insurance, it's a little bit different for them because they don't have a job, so they're not expected to pay this back. The government, taxpayers pay that. I pay for that too, you know, but it's a part of the process, unfortunately.
Okay. You mentioned earlier about your daughter being a miracle child and that she's 8 years old. Prior to having your child, what was the doctor's information or diagnosis in relation to having kid or advice or whatnot?
They pretty much told me that I wouldn't be able to have children, and that if I did, it was going to be a risk. So for the most part, I didn't think I ever would. And then so when I got pregnant at 35 with her, I was very surprised. because it was my first pregnancy. I've never had a miscarriage. And that also was surprising to my doctors. Like, they were in disbelief that not only is my first pregnancy, but I was able to carry her full term, even though towards the end they had to literally schedule her delivery. She was still full term. She's not considered premature.